Baptism of Fire, Normandy, June 1944. June 10th, 1944, Normandy, France. The morning fog rolled low over the hedgerows, thick as smoke, clinging to the damp earth still trembling from the previous night's bombardment. A column of American M4 Shermans crawled forward, engines growling under their olive-drab armor. Their tracks crushed the wet grass and the fallen apples that littered the narrow French road. Inside one of them, Private Jack Turner of the 2nd Armored Division wiped sweat from his brow, despite the cool air that seeped through the open hatch. The tank reeked of gasoline, oil, and cordite, a metallic blend that every crewman learned to live with. "Keep your eyes peeled," his commander, Sergeant William "Red" Harris, barked from the cupola. "Panthers like to play hide-and-seek out here." Turner's hands gripped the .50 caliber's handles, his knuckles white. Ahead, through the mist, the shape of a farmhouse flickered into view. Beyond it, silence. Not even birds dared to sing. A mile away, concealed behind a hedgerow, Oberfeldwebel Klaus Ritter peered through the optics of his Panzerkampfwagen 5 Panther, his lips curled into a smirk. "Amerikanische Blechdose," he muttered. "The American tin can." His crew chuckled. To them, the M4 Sherman was little more than cannon fodder. Its 75mm gun couldn't penetrate the thick frontal armor of a Panther or Tiger from any meaningful distance. The German crews had seen them burn before, fast, bright, and helpless. Ritter adjusted his sights. Through the magnified lens, he saw movement, the faint shimmer of metal in the distance. A Sherman, maybe two. He felt the rush of anticipation that came before the kill. Target, range 800 meters, fire when ready. The gunner squeezed the trigger. The 75mm shell screamed across the fields and struck the lead Sherman squarely in the front hull. A burst of flame erupted as fuel and ammunition ignited. The tank's turret blew open like a lid, flames licking the sky. "Hit confirmed," the German gunner said proudly. Ritter nodded. Another kill. Another easy victory. But this time, something was different. The smoke didn't stop moving. Out of the haze, 3 more Shermans emerged, then 5. Their engines roared like an approaching storm. The Americans didn't retreat. They spread out, advancing under covering fire from infantry and artillery. Shells from distant howitzers thundered overhead, shaking the hedgerows. "Scheisse," Ritter hissed. "There are too many of them." The Germans fired again, taking out another tank, but for every Sherman that fell, 2 more appeared. The battlefield became a sea of movement and noise, a relentless tide of olive-drab metal. The Shermans didn't need to win one-on-one duels. They just kept coming. Red Harris's voice crackled over the intercom. "Gun ready. Fire." The Sherman's 75mm roared, sending a shell straight into the Panther's flank. The round pierced the thinner armor, and the German tank erupted in a cloud of black smoke. Inside, Ritter's crew never had time to scream. Turner blinked through the smoke, heart pounding. "We got him. We got the bastard." Harris didn't celebrate. He knew there were more out there, waiting. The Sherman wasn't built for glory. It was built for war's grinding inevitability, for persistence, for movement, for victory through numbers. That morning, the myth of German invincibility began to crack. The laughter of panzer crews turned to silence as the Shermans pressed on, one field at a time, their tracks carving a path toward liberation. The war had changed, and so had the balance of power. The machine that never slept, the heart of Allied power. The battlefield smoke of Normandy had barely settled when the true weapon of the Allies revealed itself. Not just in firepower, but in the humming rhythm of industry. Back in England, hundreds of miles from the front, the sound of progress never stopped. The clang of steel on steel echoed through the vast factories of Detroit, Birmingham, and Cleveland. Welders worked in shifts so constant that sparks painted the night sky like fireworks. The M4 Sherman wasn't just a tank. It was the product of an empire of assembly lines, a mechanical heartbeat that pulsed across the Atlantic. Every 25 minutes, another Sherman rolled out of an American plant. Every 25 minutes, another engine roared to life, ready to be shipped across oceans, across continents, into history. Captain Thomas Blake, an engineer stationed with the U.S. Army Ordnance Corps in Southampton, leaned on a crate stamped M4A3. He wiped the grease from his hands and smiled. "They'll call it weak, sure," he said to his British counterpart, Lieutenant Arthur Hensley. "But when you've got 10 of them for every tiger, who do you think wins?" Hensley grinned, his tea steaming in the cold morning air. Quantity has a quality all its own. That phrase would become prophetic. While German factories were being bombed nightly, machine tools melted into slag, and assembly lines halted by shattered railways, the United States was flooding Europe with replacements faster than the Germans could destroy them. Logistics became the war's true front line. Trains loaded with Shermans crossed France like veins feeding a living body. Mechanics could fix a broken track in hours. Crews could swap out an entire engine in a single afternoon. The Sherman was built for that kind of endurance. Its radial engine, borrowed from aircraft designs, was simple, reliable, and could run on low-grade fuel. It didn't demand the complex maintenance that crippled the Tigers and Panthers. Where German tanks broke down, Shermans kept moving. Where Panthers burned out their transmissions, Shermans just refueled and rolled on. And perhaps most importantly, it was a tank any farm boy could drive. Private Jack Turner, the same gunner who survived Normandy, sat on the hull of his Sherman weeks later, eating cold rations and watching the French countryside roll by. "You know," he said to his driver, "it ain't fancy, but it gets us there. That's what matters." "Yeah," the driver laughed. "It's like a Ford that shoots back." Meanwhile, German high command struggled with a grim truth. Each Tiger tank took roughly 300,000 man-hours to build. A Sherman? About 10,000? While the Germans worshipped the idea of the perfect machine, the invincible monster, the Americans were building something far more dangerous, a machine that never stopped coming. In the ruined village of Caen, German tanker Hans Weber crouched behind his immobilized Panther. The engine had seized again. He listened to the distant rumble of Shermans advancing through the fog, dozens of engines blending into one unbroken growl. He turned to his loader. "We are outnumbered, 20 to 1. The loader nodded grimly. "Then we die here." Hours later, when Allied forces finally overran the position, they found the Panther abandoned, its crew fled or dead. Nearby, Shermans idled quietly, exhaust rising into the dawn. The men inside smoked cigarettes, joked, and waited for orders to move again. The war wasn't won by heroes alone. It was won by machines that refused to quit, and by the men who learned to trust them. The Shermans would soon push beyond the beaches, through hedgerows, into towns whose names would be carved into history. Saint-Lô, Falaise, and finally, the road to Paris. The laughter of the Panzer crews was long gone. In its place, a grim respect and a dawning fear. Fire and steel. The road to Paris. By mid-July 1944, the tide of war had turned. The beaches of Normandy were secure, and the Shermans were no longer advancing by the dozen. They were advancing by the 100. The Allied war machine, once confined to narrow landing zones, now stretched across the French countryside like an unstoppable tide of steel. The mornings began the same way, a low rumble that grew into a mechanical roar. Villagers, peeking from shattered doorways, would see dust clouds rising in the distance and hear the rhythmic clatter of treads. The Shermans were coming again. Sergeant William Red Harris, his uniform dark with oil and grime, sat half out of his cupola as his tank led a column down a dirt road towards St. Lo. "Keep your spacing tight," he called through his throat mic. "Last thing we need is another tiger getting a lucky shot." The road twisted through rows of hedgerows, the infamous bocage that had slowed the Allies for weeks. But now, the Americans had adapted. Engineers welded metal prongs, nicknamed rhino tusks, to the fronts of Shermans, allowing them to punch straight through the hedges instead of being ambushed at every turn. Turner, now a veteran gunner, peered through his periscope. "Movement. Left ridge," he said calmly. Harris squinted. The sun glinted off something metallic. "Panzer. 9 o'clock. Range 600. Take him." The gun thundered. The 75mm shell streaked through the air, striking the German tank's side armor. It wasn't enough to destroy it, but it forced the Panther to turn its turret, exposing its weaker rear. Another Sherman fired, and this time the Panther exploded in a burst of flame and smoke. Turner pumped a fist. "Scratch one cat!" But the celebration didn't last. From the tree line, another shell screamed toward them. It missed by inches, showering the Sherman in dirt and shrapnel. The tank shook violently, the crew gripping the interior handles for balance. "Driver! Forward! 30 meters! Find cover!" Harris barked. The Sherman lurched ahead, crashing through the hedgerow. Branches scraped the hull, leaves flying past the hatches. On the other side, they found a shallow depression. A perfect firing position. "Hold here," Harris ordered. "Let's return the favor." They fired again and again. The smell of cordite filled the cramped compartment. Each shot echoed like thunder through the French fields. Outside, the combined noise of engines, explosions, and gunfire created an apocalyptic symphony. Fields burned, trees snapped, the ground shook. But through it all, the Shermans kept advancing. By the end of July, St. Lo was rubble.